For keyboard use setup, there are quite a few aspects to consider. So the first one is that you want to get your wrist to be neutral. You don't want it to be too flexed, too elevated. Oftentimes people have it too elevated, like when you're typing here, it can be too elevated or too flexed. And if it's too elevated, which is oftentimes what people experience, you're doing this, what you want to do is that you can take a few binders to tilt the keyboard. So if it's too elevated, your wrists are too elevated here, you can get a couple of binders and tilt the keyboard so that the wrist is more neutral while you're typing. So this is what I mean. And you can use shelf liner for traction so that the keyboard doesn't slip from under. And you can build it up, you know, 2 or 3 keyboards depending on your body size, the angle you're at, and then that can create a more neutral position in terms of flexion and elevation for some. And we'll talk about the elbow angle later. So there's that. If you're having wrist issues, you try and keep it more at a neutral level. And then you also have to look at what we call ulnar deviation. So when a keyboard, a traditional keyboard, the letters are pretty close together. So what ends up happening is that you deviate your wrist this way while you're typing. So as you can see, I'm deviating my wrist this way as I'm typing. So you actually want it to separate it so that there's no deviation. So if you're really having a lot of wrist issues and you can afford to, you can buy a keyboard that is separated. So while you're typing, you're not doing this, it's separated so that your wrists are more in a neutral position when it's separated. So when you have all those components and the keyboard is separated, you can maintain pretty good wrist position. However, if you're having elbow issues, that creates too much of a bend on the elbow. If you're having a lot of elbow issues, actually what is best for the elbow would be if you can get a negative angle, what we call negative tilt on the keyboard. And that is when things like keyboard trays come in, where you can actually put it kind of on your lap. And you'll have, so you can't quite see here, but so for example, I'm typing here, and if I put it in my lap, I have a greater angle in my elbow here, and that decreases the pressure on the elbow if you're having elbow issues. So the best is if you can actually type on your lap, you can get some shelf liner material, put it on your lap and put your keyboard on top, and that will help to hold it there in place as you're typing if you don't have other issues, and that can help to alleviate it. Either way, any kind of keyboard setup you have, like any kind of fine motor activity, I recommend doing stretches and releases for your arms, and you can find those in my hand, wrist, elbow issues area. You can find all those videos there to help relieve. So I would recommend every 45, an hour is pushing it, but about every 45 minutes to take a break, take a 1 to 2 minute break and do some quick stretches or releases to help relieve things. So it doesn't matter if you have the best keyboard setup. If you keep doing repetitive activities, you can start to irritate it. So just even having a standard keyboard and doing stretches and releases, if you're using computer all day, can be enough for many people. And another issue is, if you're really having elbow and wrist issues, is not only to get a keyboard that is separated, but also tented. So if you rotate too much and you do too much activity here, you can create issues all along the arm and even up to the shoulder and the neck. So if you have a tented keyboard, it creates more of a horizontal. So it's split and then it's tented and you're typing more like this. So I have some options on my website of some examples that you can purchase if you're interested in getting something like that. And again, any type of keyboard you get, you always still have to stretch and release and do movements to make sure that the fascia and the muscles don't get tightened up to create joint issues and muscle tearing, tendon tearing, things like that. So that is what I recommend in terms of keyboard use.